tutorial video, how to draw hands. Difficult things to draw. The angle. Have joints in them. Good at drawing hands. Hopefully to be useful and at art as well. Here at 30%, be very light, bright red, so it's easy for you guys. Construction line layer, so shape of our hand. Doing some simple hands, actions. Just keep it pretty simple for this first one. We're just center line here, where our wrist will be. Put in. That's where the arm is going. As with hands is, you look at one hand, kind of the proportion. Everybody has different. Close. What I'm gonna do is right here, you're going to sort of, we're gonna make like so. So it's rounded off. I actually want this middle portion to be the highest peak of our little hand here. And again, we're just constantly not overworking. We're constantly reshaping and messing around with the hand until we get it to look right. It does not have to be perfect right away. So next, what I will do is I'm actually gonna just move this down here right now so I have plenty of space. From there, what I like to do is we'll assign our joints. So right here, kind of at the peak here, because again, our shape is kind of like that. Right at the peak, we'll put a joint here. This is for the middle finger, pointer finger, ring finger, and then this would be the pinky area right here. So as you can see, my section right here came out way too much. Nothing wrong with that. So we'll just do this. Again, you can look at your own hand for reference, like so. Then I will kind of make these knuckles a little bit bigger just so there's not so much space between them. Because there will be some space in between the fingers, but not a lot. From there, what I like to do next, just for this position at least, is we want to just basically follow this shape right here. And just put in a light guideline here at the top. So theoretically, this is where our fingers are going to end. You do not have to get it perfect right away. It's fine. Generally, however long your pointer finger is, should almost just be the same length as your hand portion itself. So from the tip to this little section here should roughly be about the same part as the pad of the hand. So then I'm just going to take some straight lines like so. And then from there, we'll say this is the very top of our pointer finger, and again, we can rebalance these as time goes on, so don't worry about that. Right here is the tip of our pointer, ring, and the pinky we're just going to put a little bit further down. Now I'm going to kind of show you how to space that out. So if you look at your fingers, you've got a joint like here and right here, okay? So first, and these joints are basically all the same length. It's just because the fingers are in slightly different positioning on the hand here, it's going to follow the same shape the whole way through, okay? So I'm going to put this like so. So now what we want to do, say here's the pinky joints. We'll make our pinky end right here. Actually, no, make our pinky end about right here. It's about like, it's pretty much a full, I mean, everybody's hands are a little bit different, but you could even make your pinky literally a full joint shorter than your ring finger. I'll extend this one just a little bit though, like so. Then from there, I'm just gonna add in little joints here. Roughly just little oval shapes. This is just gonna kind of help me keep the overall width correct here. Although, I'm not gonna follow those lines for the pinky. I'm gonna put the pinky joints kind of in between the joints of our other fingers. So I'm gonna put a joint here, put a joint here, and then I can shrink this one down a little bit more like that. From there, I'm going to add another oval sort of egg shape here at the very tip. So this is just kind of where the tip of the finger is going to be. And then swooping off from those, we can give kind of pointed shapes like this. Now I'm going for some basic anime girl sort of hands here. And so I'm trying to keep everything kind of looking dainty and skinny, just so it kind of makes the hand look a little bit more delicate. And again, these are just placeholders, so some of the weird curves and edges that some of these shapes are getting themselves into will be straightened out in the finished product here. And then in between each finger, I'm going to add a little concave line like so. And as you mess around with the actual hand shape itself, you can kind of mess around with the knuckles and some of that. Like if you want a real bony character, you can kind of jut out, well, not really like that, but I mean you can jut out a little bit at the knuckle joints, give it some more depth. But for this, we just want to keep our fingers relatively pointy for our sort of anime female character. So now we've got the just hand portion, and now we'll add in the thumb. So if you look at your own hand, you can kind of see roughly the halfway point here of the hand pad is kinda, I guess even lower than that, kinda where the thumb actually connects, like in this area. So if we're just holding it outside from us, there's gonna be a little connector right there. We're just gonna bring this like so, have kind of like a little almost triangle shape with a little bit of a bump right here. You could keep it just completely flat. You could also do that like that, and it's not going to really make a big difference. But I'm just going to catch a little bit of the actual pad of the hand. From there, we'll add our first thumb joint along with a general line here. And if you look at your hand, you can kind of notice that the tip of the thumb comes almost, like if you're really pushing your hand together here, like you're closing all your fingers, you'll find that the thumb, for me at least, is kind of right here. And so we just want to keep that in mind. Out like this, that should theoretically be a good length, but we're going to find out once we actually draw this thing in. So roughly around halfway point, we'll add in another oval for the thumb joint. We'll add in a larger egg shape for the thumb's pad, and then just kind of follow this shape. And then I'm just gonna break this up a little bit so it's a little bit bent, like so. And then we'd have a nail here. So bump right here. Nail, nail, another nail right there. Like so. And kind of make it, you know, hinge at the joints, of course. When we do the actual line art, we'll be able to mess around with it a little bit more, but at least for the construction portion, this is fine. I will admit that when I'm drawing like hands, let's say like on my fan arts and stuff, I don't usually draw out every joint, but for learning and practicing anatomy, I find that at least for me, it kind of helps to just visualize each joint, because then that way you can kind of see where the finger itself is going to be bending, and you can kind of better keep the width of it, you know? So basically, that's just our simple hand facing away from us. I'll add a little joint there. Now we can look at a hand facing us. And I'm just going to get all of the construction lines done first, and then I'll get into the actual line art portion. I think it'll go faster that way. Don't want this video to be too long for you guys, but it's also not the easiest to draw hands, so naturally it's going to be a little bit longer anyways. So, but moving right along, we're basically going to do the exact same thing, but this time we're just going to be looking at the palm of the hand. So this time my thumb will be over here, and so keeping that in mind, we're just going to do the same thing that we did before, making a little pad, a little paddle shape like this. And don't worry about getting this shape perfect. It is going to change a lot before we start doing anything. We just want the middle finger joint to be higher. It's like the little peak of the hand paddle here, like so. Then we'll add in finger joints, done a little bit closer there. Then like I can see that things are a little bit too far apart here. Because again, we're drawing a female hand here, so we don't want it to get too terribly wide on us. But then we'll take this like so, and then we'll put in our thumb in a second. But same idea as before, I'm just trying to map out where I want the tips of my fingers to be, and I'm just trying to visualize it, and we'll mess around with the length if we need to later. But I will say I do want to kind of shrink this up a little bit, so hand's a little bit longer than I would like so. So again, basically the size here underneath the joint of your middle finger is basically how long your actual finger is going to be. So I'm just going to add in our guidelines like so. Like this. Okay, I'm going to bring this one down a little bit. And then the pinky is basically, I'm going to put kind of in between the knuckles here. So like, now if I'm over here, we're just going to put in some guidelines for the knuckles, which will be the same positioning as the actual fingertips. So the middle finger will be a little bit higher than the other joints. And then for the pinky, I'm going to actually put its joints in between the joints of the ring finger here. So see, it's in between these ones. Like so. From there, I will add in these oval shapes for the fingertips themselves. I like doing this too because it helps you sort of set the width for the finger. I find that if I just try to eyeball it, you just end up messing around with the hands way too long. But if you just put in a little pad circle there, to me it makes it a lot easier. Because then from there, we can put in some shapes here that get a little bit wider, very slightly wider, as I get to the base of the finger. And keep them a little bit more pointed at the top. That kind of keeps the hand for our female characters a little more delicate looking. A little daintier, so you're trying to keep it a little bit elongated. And again, these first two hands here are very simple. We'll do a little actual position that you can use in some of your art pieces, but this is just trying to understand the hand itself. And then, since this is the pad of the hand, we'll actually just see the very, very tips of the fingernails. So I'm just going to kind of put in some placeholders there. From there, we can finally add in our thumb so our hand doesn't look cursed. For that, coming off the joint here, where you can use your own hand for reference as well, we'll kind of put in a shape like this. So again, halfway point of the hand is roughly where the thumb connects. Put this like so. Then we've got joint number 1. I guess I should put this, and I'm gonna kind of curve. So if you look at your hand, you're just holding it open. The thumb pad itself kind of points away from you. So for this one, I'm not keeping the line dead straight. I'm actually gonna curve it slightly. And I can add a joint, and I'll put the pad a little bit behind that. Actually, that's a little bit too much curve. It kind of looks horrifying. Like that. And again, we can mess with the balance all we want. It is notoriously difficult to just eyeball it and get it right from the get-go. That's why we work on these super light construction lines. That way we can mess with the overall balance and get all of our proportions right. So if you notice here, like I established my knuckles here, but then I pointed up above it. So we actually want the hinge to be on the knuckle itself, not past the knuckle. And then I'm gonna kind of bring this down. Because you can notice too, your thumb really isn't that much thicker than the rest of your fingers. So especially on our female characters, we just want to make sure that the thumb itself isn't like super chubby compared to the rest of the hand. Because it's not going to be that much thicker than the actual fingers themselves. And it basically, looking at my thumb here, I'm just going to shrink it ever so slightly. So that way it's a little bit lower than the first knuckle. If you look at your own hand, that's kind of where it lines up. So then from there, it's gonna bring this down a little bit more so it balances up a little bit better. Like so. And then from here, looking at my hand, I mean, my thumb is still a little bit thicker than what I would like. So I'm just gonna actually bring it up like this. so that way it's a little bit thinner. And then we'll just edit this little line here. Add the little skin fold there. We still want the thumb nook itself to be like this, because then this just kind of has a little section here that pops out to meet it. And again, these lines will make a little bit more sense in the actual finished product here. And we can kind of mess around with our line art. So there we go. So we'll call that good for right now. We'll just move this. And finally, before we get to the line art, I'm just going to do a very simple pose for the hand that is quite common in sort of anime, manga characters. It'll be at a slight angle so we can kind of mess around with the fingers. So first of all, I drew in just kind of that same little paddle shape that we've done before. This time I'll put in a little line here. That is because right here, and once I get this down, then you'll actually see what I'm working on. It can be kind of tough when I'm trying to explain what I'm doing before you actually know exactly what hand pose we're going for. But just bear with me here, it all kind of makes sense soon. So this is the little pooch that we see from our thumb. From there, you can use your own hand as reference. We will add in our thumb, like so. Little thumbnail there. It's not super visible. From there, just under the thumb tip, I'm gonna add in our finger. Like so. And remember the joint. So there's a joint here and a joint here. So that's where your finger is gonna actually bend. We don't want to bend it past those points, okay? And try to keep your fingers around the same width as the thumb. Especially on our little female characters, their thumb isn't going to be so much thicker than the rest of their fingers. So the finger and thumb is kind of pushed up past the rest of the fingers. The rest are down a little bit lower. What we will do though is we will ever so slightly see the back of that finger like that before our thumb meat kind of takes it up here. Then we want to take that same sort of shape here, but then really drag it back in. And now that you kind of see what I'm doing, now you can kind of position your own hand in the same sort of manner. And you can use it as a reference for what we're trying to accomplish. And then I am going to hide those in the pad of my thumb a little bit. Like so. There, so again I've got knuckle, 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 then the knuckles up here on the top. And then from there, we can kind of do this. Add in our wrist. Like that. So from here, I'm just going to make my hand a little bit thinner. It kind of got a little bit big. We still want our female hands to be dainty. That I will tuck this in a little bit more, which means I gotta redo this line. And again, I'm just working with it until I get the balance that I like and the overall like actually bring this finger up a little bit. Add the nail. There. Alright. So now we can actually work on the line art. So I'm just going to shrink this down a little bit so it's roughly the same size as our other hands. I mean, not quite the same size, but a little bit. And then I do not like the look of that nail. And again, just remembering that it bends at the joint, not past it. There. So here's just some very simple hand shapes, and I will actually do the line art. You can use whatever color for your line that you want. I recommend just going dark enough that if you're coloring and shading, you can bring it down there, and it's not going to make the lines look odd. You could add a little bit of red or purple to it, you know, so don't go fully to black, but since this is just an anatomy study, I'm not planning on, like, rendering this. It's just focusing on the hand shape, so I'm just going to go pitch black. So now, you can kind of develop your own method for breaking down the hand and drawing it as you go. I kind of still like, on our female characters, starting from the fingernail. So I'm going to add in these little semi-pointed shapes here. Oops. You can always use references from other, like, anime or manga drawings as well to kind of get these right. But just semi-pointed oval shapes, like that. Gotta make this one a little bit bigger. And again, just kind of mess with it as you go. Like, for example, this shape here is not great. So we're just gonna delete it and try this again. It's better. Like so. From there, if you're doing this for an actual piece, then I'd recommend using a new layer. I'm not too concerned about the quality of my line art, because this is just a study, so I'm just gonna start from there. Like so, and just try to follow this outside line here. Trying to keep my fingers relatively skinny for our female character. And the more realistic looking you want your hands, you can actually start adding in, you know, like shapes or, you know, like bulges and protrusions at the knuckles if you want. You can make like your pinkies a little bit crooked too. But for our anime character, it's supposed to be a little bit perfect. We're gonna try to just keep these super pointed and skinny so it stays looking like a lady's hand here. If we get too thick, then it kind of looks more like a man. And we'll follow this shape here, which I just botched. There we go. Knuckle. This. Now the thumb, which is my least favorite part of the hand to draw. I'm gonna put this in here. Going to bend at the knuckles. That'll give it a little bit more depth, which I'm struggling to do, as you can see. Okay, I'll just keep this one shape. How about that? And then do this. Shoot this out. There we go. And then we'll review what we did in just a second, but I'm just gonna bust these out real quick. So again, I'm kind of remembering the pad of the thumb is kind of in this area. There's a little like section there is kind of meatier, so everything in here is just kind of skinny. So I'm visualizing that while I'm drawing it. And then this time, we don't really have a nail to work off of, which means you kind of just gotta work with this shape until you get the overall shape that you like. not the easiest, but as you practice it, it becomes easier. My hand's a little too thick there, so I'll kind of scoot that in for our female character. It's the negative of using my own hand is that it is fat, so I cannot just visualize dainty little fingers here. There we go. Okay, that's pretty much what I want. And again, we just want it to get very slightly thicker at the base. We don't want the tips to be so thick that it looks like a point, you know? It's okay if they're a little bit pointed. And what you can always do too, if it's a little bit more pointed than what you'd like, you can just make them a little bit stubbier and then just kind of connect them. So that way they're not quite as pointy, but because like this pinky is just a little too pointed for me, so I'm just gonna be a little bit different. Same with my middle finger. And again, we're just trying to get the balance here right and the shapes right. It takes time to get good at hands anyways, so especially now in the beginning, as you're learning how to draw them, it's okay to really just take your time and sort of balance things as you go. Because someday you'll be able to just drop a finger in and it'll be perfect immediately, which will be nice. But I am not at that level myself, so just doing the best that we can. Which clearly this middle finger is not cooperating, which is not helpful. There we go. Alright, so now looking at our own hand here, we're not going to quite see the nail fully, but on our female characters who kind of have longer fingernails, I like just adding little tiny fingernails here to the very tip, like that. And then on the thumb, kind of the same idea, like so. Then we can follow our hand shape down like this, and the skinnier you keep this, you can kind of make it look more and more feminine. I'll kind of just keep it skinny, I guess. It actually looks a little bit better than what I had, so oh well. Do that there. Add this. Then we'll connect these with our little concave lines. This, and again, I'm not worried about my line art quality right now, just because I'm not doing this as like a fan art, fully rendered picture. I'm just doing this as a study. So my line art isn't going to be perfect, but if you're trying to do this on your own, then yeah, you're going to want to make sure that your line art is good and the weight isn't all over the place. And then finally, our last little hand shape here. Whenever I have a nail, I 9 times out of 10 just start at the nail, because it works as like a good anchor point. The nail itself isn't going to move and bend around. So kind of like the hips on our like full figures, like it's an unmovable little object there. It's just gonna kind of be pointed in different directions depending on what's going on. And so I like using that as like an anchor. Like so. Connect it there. Add in my little joint, which theoretically I'll add that joint in when I'm done with this finger, because if this finger's slightly off, I'm gonna have to add that one in anyways. So I'm gonna add in a little shape here. So, because yeah, see, because now this has to move over a little bit. Like this. Technically want that more like that shape. So I'm just gonna see, if you're working on multiple layers, then it's easier to fix your line art, but again, I'm not too concerned about what my line art looks like. I'm gonna trace this out. I'm actually gonna, I kind of made this finger a little bit skinnier now that I'm in the line art. So I'm just gonna wing the rest of the fingers, which usually goes wrong, but so far it's working out slightly. outside line here is not wanting to work with me, so I'm gonna have to mess with him a little bit. And again, I'm basically just messing with it until I get a shape that I'm looking for. That is the beauty of using a art program and tablet, is that I can just redo it over and over and use very fast, accurate lines. Whereas if you're doing this traditionally, you kind of have to really establish right where you want your actual finished lines to go, then go from there. That line I messed up because my headset just screamed at me for no reason. Oh, the more I mess with it, the more I'm like, these fingers should still come out just a little bit more. There. Although, this pinky here is actually smaller than that one, so it's only going to be visible like that. There. Alright. So I am satisfied with that, so we had these. Without our little construction lines in the way, you'll find some more little balances you can do, like, you know, these fingers could come a little bit closer together. So, you know, I can just do this, poke them in a little bit, like that, and then you just want to, you know, make any little adjustments, make it look nice in the finished product here, but we'll do that. We can see that this little finger right here, some of these are getting a little bit too wide down here, so I'll just adjust that. Again, I'm not concerned about the quality of my line art here, so I'm just doing a little tutorial, so I'm just trying to help you get the shapes. Then we can take our pinky, bring it in slightly, just so that way it's not so far apart. That makes our hand a little bit skinnier too, which makes it look a little bit more feminine for our anime ladies. Then we can just kind of make these lines here not so drastic, because we want these to be pretty faint, just to kind of get a classic sort of anime look. Because if you're like coloring and stuff, then sometimes it's kind of better to not just be using tons and tons of line art details, because then you can just kind of detail it in the actual coloring portion, and that makes everything appear a little bit softer. So, well, just kind of looking at my own hand, figuring out how I want that to look. So I guess I'll just leave it like this. A tiny gap right there. And then I can just add in some little details. Alright, so again, the nice thing is you can use your own hand for reference, and you can really balance it out. You know, like we could stand to bring this hand a little bit further this way, like this. So again, a lot of this is just once you finally get the shapes you're looking for, you just want to check it back over and make sure everything's balanced properly. Because as you make adjustments, you're bound to throw things off a little bit. Again, hands are notoriously hard to get right, same with feet, so they just take practice, use lots of references. That is my biggest piece of advice, is even if you just have pictures of hands and stuff up while you're drawing, it goes a mile when it comes to drawing these, because they're just not easy to do. But if you're going for just simple sort of anime hands, just try to keep the details to a minimum on them. Keep everything kind of pointed for your female characters. We don't want them too wide, because then it starts looking a little bit more manly. And then if you have a hand position that you're trying to draw, just make it yourself with your own hand, and then you can kind of mimic it and copy it in the actual um, construction line. So you can kind of just use yourself as a reference too. But again, it can be very helpful to just have references and just keep practicing. It's not easy, but eventually it'll get a lot easier. I'm still not the greatest at drawing hands, but at least this is a good starting point for you guys, for anyone who's just starting out. So hopefully you found this helpful, and I will see you in the next one.